Holy cow, there you are. Hey, it's JR from Trade Skillers Anonymous. Thanks so much for tuning back in. Today I just wanted to cover what is my third version of a Onefinity CNC. This happens to be the Elite Foreman. It's a 48 by 48 cutting envelope machine with a Masso G3 controller. Thought you might be interested to see the evolution from the first machine to this current version. I've had it now for, I suppose, a month or two, and very impressed. Thought I'd just share with you some of my initial thoughts. Thanks, let's get into this. All right, so the very first thing I would tell you is that my first machine was called a woodworker, and as outlined by this blue tape here, which represents a 32 by 32 cutting area, so this center section here, that was the size of my original machine. And somewhere about a year in or so, Onefinity came out with a different X-rail for that could be fitted to the machine. And as a result of that wider machine, my work envelope opened up to 48 inches wide, still 32 inches deep. So it really made it capable of tiling a complete width of plywood, as an example, with a work envelope that was 32 inches deep. Worked really well, and I enjoyed it. Now, that first machine had a Buildbotics controller, which was really driven by a Raspberry Pi. But later, this machine came out. I think these were pre-order available, which is what I did, in late November. And so now, by removing that tape, which was 32 by 48 wide, what you see now is the size of this machine, which is 48 inches in X and 48 inches in Y. So first thing is, the work envelope changing has really opened the machine up to be, very capable. All right, so now one of the things that really drew me to Onefinity in the first place is really the drive mechanism. And I'm gonna just point to it. I'm gonna not jog the camera around too hard. I'm gonna bring the machine X-axis in closer so that we can take a look together at part of what makes this machine different than some of the other consumer grade machines. Now, on the machines that are smaller than this and have a different controller, closer to what Onefinity started out with, so that's going to be the journeyman size and the woodworker size, and I believe the machinist. These are hardened shafts. These are 50 millimeter shafts, and on the X-rail, there is an additional bar here called the Stiffy, and I run a 2.2 kilowatt spindle, 80 millimeters, and it's heavy. And if you're gonna run this machine fast, this really, I think this third rail just gives me peace of mind. But even without the Stiffy rail, and you can see that this is riding here on, let me pull in here. So this has sealed bearings here, and when you have bearings riding on a shaft like this instead of V wheels, as an example, there's just nothing that's gonna get in the way of this thing running smooth. And then down here, we've got a lead screw. I think that's about a 15 millimeter or so. Let me have a peek at that. No, excuse me, that's a 16 millimeter lead screw and ball nut. So again, this is what's going to replace a drive belt in other systems that might cost less or have less engineering in them. So what that's going to do is it really provides you the least amount of resistance and the least opportunity for having the machine create a bind that your motors then have to overcome. Speaking of the motors, the other thing that's different about this machine, and I'm going to pan over here, let me come down just a hair. So instead of just regular stepper motors, this machine has closed loop stepper motors. And what that means is the computer is going to tell the machine to move this motor some certain distance. And on a regular stepper motor, it's going to do that usually, but there's no way for the computer to know if the amount of travel that it told this motor to create actually happened. It could have run into an obstacle or something could have gone wrong. The machine without a closed stepper motor would not know that it did not achieve its desired travel. There's a few extra wires on a closed loop stepper motor. And what's happening here is the computer tells this motor to drive a certain amount of rotations of this ball screw, and then it waits to see and when I say wait, it's milliseconds. It checks to see, did the travel actually happen? And that's really going to save you from losing steps or having a problem in a job, and I think is a really, really great feature. The purpose of this video would be missed if we didn't talk about this controller. This is the entire controller. The black box that's behind it is simply the power supply. All the brains, everything that's driving this machine is contained in this box that's, I presume the casing is made by Masso. Inside, and I'm not going to open this because, you know, it just looks like computer parts with wiring, is the Masso G3 controller. And this is a significant step up from the previous model that Onefinity was using, which again, I think was shared technology from a company called BuildBotics. And that was based on a Raspberry Pi system. And it was certainly very capable. I used that machine. I did not have any problems with that controller, but you know, people who are doing maybe more advanced work than I am doing and really need to use some advanced features that a proper CNC controller could provide you exist in this machine. Now, I am going to tell you that if you are brand new to CNC or you had the previous machine and you're stepping up to this one is going to let you make every mistake that the previous controller is going to give you warnings about. And this could be silly things like when you're probing for XYZ on the previous machine, it would interrupt that process by giving you messages on the screen to remind you of certain things. Remove the magnet, put the probe, touch the probe to make sure you have continuity. Just a few simple steps. This machine doesn't do that. It assumes that you know what you're doing. It's not going to remind you to attach the magnet, if you need it, to the collet of your router or spindle. It's going to assume that you have done that. And so when you go to home Z as an example, there's no warning. It just, you hit home Z, it's going to assume that you've done everything correct. So if you haven't, it's going to just go. So something important to watch out for. Ben Myers did a good walkthrough probably a month ago. He had a beta machine about the different screens that you can get into. It is an offline machine so that you have the capability to just put your file that you're going to run on a USB drive, slap it into this box, and it's going to run. You don't need to be connected to the internet, although there is a utility tool that will allow you to do file transfers via Wi-Fi. I don't happen to use it. This machine doesn't have internal memory, so it does need for the USB stick to be there to act as essentially the hard drive for the computer. So much like the other machine, so I'll try to zoom in here. I did dismount this from its normal location. Normally you have a mount that you would put it on the left corner of the machine right about here. However, I found that when I home the machine, if I had the screen moved out here, it would interfere with, it wouldn't hurt anything, but it was pushing this box out of the way. So I dismounted it and put it up on the wall. But in order to show you some of the features, I've taken it off the wall just to show you some of the very simple features. So you've got a cycle start, cycle stop, of course your e-stop button, and I just moved that out of frame. All right, so down here you have manual buttons for cycle start, cycle stop, your e-stop, and then you have a touch screen here where you can manipulate things just like you'd be used to on a previous machine. The rapids work great. Homing the machine is very easy. If you need to manually zero the machine, that's done here. If you want to home the machine over here, that's done by just simply double tapping this. When you first start this machine, it wants you to cycle the e-stop button. Nothing will happen until you do that. And it's just a way for the machine, a safeguard, to know that if you need the e-stop during your next job, it's going to work for you as you expect. All right, and then to continue to talk about machine controls, I did opt for the accessory that was sold by Masso. It did not come with the machine. Honestly, I don't remember how much it was. Probably in the $150 to $200 range. There were other ones that people have, experimented with. I'm going to tell you, I'm no rocket surgeon, so I knew that this one would work with that controller. I didn't want to mess around with buck converters to try to get the voltage on the same system, and I sure as hell wasn't going to fry that Masso controller by using the wrong one. So what I really like this for, so I'll put this on Z. So especially if I'm trying to get dialed in to a Z, if I'm centering in the center of a, or homing on the center of a workpiece, but I can get very fine control. This is at, I guess it'd be 1,000 millimeters, or 100, excuse me. But you can dial it down and take it to a really fine level if you're trying to sneak up on a corner of a workpiece or whatever it is that you would want to do. This machine is also capable of a 4th axis, so I do not yet have a rotary device. Probably will in the future, but I just have been a little bit short on time lately anyway, so that's just a different rabbit hole that I feel like I'm not ready with available time for yet. But this was a good ad. I don't use it a ton, but when I have needed it, I've liked that I've had it. The other accessory that I got was this touch probe. It is very similar, if not exactly the same, as the one that has come on previous Onefinity machines. I will say that I think it's made by Triketra. What I did on my last one, because you'll have a tendency to stick it on there, and if you're an idiot like me, you pull on the wire, you'll eventually pull it out of this connection here. So I wish that there was some strain relief or that was treated differently. I just don't feel like this particular piece is going to be super durable. I broke the last one that I had, and just put an alligator clip on the end, so that solved that. But this, some people don't use this. They use the paper method or feeler gauges. I just like to be able to use this. One of the other things that's pretty different about this machine versus the prior version that I had, the previous version, which I thought was actually pretty damn smart, they used Stallhoming. So as soon as the machine met a physical stop, the motor current would go up, it would sense it instantly, and it would set that home at that location. I didn't personally have any problems with it. I understand that some people may not favor that system, but what they've done in this system, and by looking at it, I would call it a Hall switch, that there's a piece here. I'm going to run a picture-in-picture down below where this piece of the X carriage comes up and breaks a beam in this sensor here. And as soon as it does that, it knows that it's homed. And there are sensors all over this thing telling it where home is. And so if you prefer to have a physical interaction with home stops, but not relying on those little 25-cent clicker switches, this is a high-tech, pretty innovative way to home the machine. I don't have enough, dial indicators or enough time really to sit here and show you that it homes repeatably over and over again. I can tell you though that I did test that in other ways and found it to be spot on. So I think that's another good upgrade in this machine versus the previous machines. So among some of the what I would call thoughtful touches, as it would seem, as this company has had experience over the last couple of years and have machines and asking people for feedback, it seems like they really are thoughtful about the feedback that comes. So as an example, you used to, on previous machines, have to go and outfit yourself with these drag chains for cable management. And there wasn't really a great solution right from the factory for that. There were some really innovative people that jumped in there and made some things available. But the way that Onefinity addressed it with this machine is that, first off, all the wires are already in the drag chain when you get it. But this part really kind of surprised me. And I know aluminum's not the most expensive thing in the world, but this tray that would support all along the back, the underside of this drag chain, you would think, they'd probably find a way to do that out of, molded plastic or something like that. This is an aluminum piece, and I know that's probably not coming through on the camera, but this is metal. This is not plastic. This does not feel cheap, and it works really great. There's another one on the other Y rail on the left side of the machine that supports another set of drag chains, which again, all the wires were in there. You don't have to even route the wires through the drag chains when you get your machine. So again, I just thought that was something that struck me as they're paying attention to how the machines are getting used and what people do to them to make them better in the first version or two that they had out. So I've tried to keep this one relatively short, just because there are already a couple of videos out there. Again, look at Ben Myers Woodshop on YouTube. He had an initial beta machine and did a really good job doing a review on some of these things that were different, got more into the computer screens than I'm going to. I just feel like once something gets covered, there's no really a need for me to go over it back again. But what does all that stuff mean that we just went over? Number one, I was in the pre-order crowd of folks. I wasn't the first, but when I found them, they still had not delivered their first machine to a retail customer, and this was, I guess, back in 2020. My first machine I got in January, I think, or February of 21. Ran the hell out of that thing, and that was the initial, that was the woodworker that was 32 by 32. Remember I showed that size earlier just so you could get a sense of what it means, right? So in my videos, I really try to cook it down to, okay, all that stuff's great. I don't want to data dump on you. What does it mean? Put it in my life. How's it going to work for me? When I upgraded the X rail to the 48-inch size, that was really a leap for me because, again, as I mentioned, that meant that you could put a complete sheet of plywood in this thing, and if you were able to or comfortable with tiling, you could, you had a 48 wide machine with infinite Y direction capability. I didn't use that, but that 48-inch width is really an important benchmark. As you grow, or as I grew in my CNC knowledge, what I found is that a lot of the stuff I did initially were small things, probably less than 12 inches square, certainly less than 24 inches square, mostly. But once you get comfortable with a machine, the CAD software, the conversion to CAM, getting it into the machine and making the machine do what you want it to do, what I have a tendency to do is I found new ways to use the machine that I had not anticipated when I had the first version of it. And so now I'm into some, rather large, items. And I can just tell you, it's been a pleasure to grow my CNC journey, if you'll call it that, get new knowledge and participate in the community. So if you are thinking about a CNC machine, I got to tell you, you should have a hard look at this. And I should mention, this is not a sponsored video. I don't work at Onefinity. I'm just very interested in seeing a company come in, and they've really disrupted the market. If you look at other competitors of theirs, so who would that be? Shapeco and, just Google DIY CNC. I forget the other guys' names. But they really disrupted the market, and now the other guys are doing things like lead screws and linear shafts and bearings instead of the belt drives and the V-wheels. And so the cost of this machine, which is always a topic or questions that I get, the cost of this machine to its next competitor, and when I say that, I mean a real competitor, somebody that has super rigid construction. And if you go back and look at my first video, where I reviewed my my first Onefinity after a couple of months, that was the thing that I talked the most about, because rigidity in any kind of machining that's where you win or lose, the rigidity of the machine. Most other machines that are not as rigid, they can claim that they can go fast, but the fact of the matter is, if you push a non-rigid machine too fast, then your work is going to suffer as a result of it, because the machine will flex, and where that translates to, how does it get into your life, is instead of a straight line, you're going to have a crooked line, or your features don't come out how you thought that they should. So anyway, that's the Elite Foreman, and it's by Onefinity. And I'll put some links to stuff that I've used or put on my machine that may help you if you're new to this space and just sitting around thinking, do I get an Elite version or the former versions, which they still sell, and they're a very capable machine. But I hope that this was helpful, and I really do appreciate you stopping by and spending a little time with me. Have a good day.